this isn't like a really, whether you're for billboards or against billboards, it's a question of the rule of law. It's a question of the rule of law. And if you don't have the rule of law, well, there you go. We have a lady here tonight who has a problem. And this is not the city of Miami. You live in Hialeah. This billboard shines as a digital billboard newly erected along the Palmetto Expressway, which we talk about the county. For those of you who are with the county, you know that there's a provision in the county code that deals with the expressways and the freeways. This billboard shines in her condominiums, people that live there. It's very close to residential on the other side as well. Recently erected, changing 10,800 times a day, which, by the way, the industry says, oh, that's not an intermittent change, it's static. Did you hear what I just said? You change 10,800 times a day, but it's not an intermittent change, it's static. The billboard says, that the industry says, that's static for 8 seconds, and then it changes, and it's not intermittent. Well, like, where are you coming from? And I was involved in a case out in Arizona where the appellate court in Arizona said, well, of course it's intermittent. You just look up, the common dictionary definition of intermittent. Something that changes every 8 seconds is intermittent. And if it's changing every 8 seconds, it's a violation of the state federal agreement in the state of Florida. There's a lawsuit today in Washington asking Federal Highway to reverse position that took 6 years ago to enforce the act in connection with intermittent signs. And if we had that enforcement, the issue we have here would be one of brightness, but you wouldn't have something that changes every 8 seconds throughout the night. As a billboard industry spokesperson in Jacksonville said recently to a similar situation, we'll buy you blackout curtains. Why should somebody tolerate a billboard company saying, we'll solve your problems, we'll get you blackout curtains for your windows? That's an accurate picture. Mr. Pollack, you took these pictures. Guilty as charged. I want to come back to a possible grant, or actually a grant that I want to talk about later. But John, maybe I can do this. I was going to go ahead and take you to another presentation on this. Okay. I don't know if you can see that. I just want to escape and get back to the screen. Okay, back to the regular program. Well, let me talk to you about a few other things while, did you enjoy that? Yeah. I want to walk you through, and I'm leaving an outline of a little chronological history, because the history of billboard control, in America, while it started in the days of Elizabeth Lawton and Dwight Eisenhower and John Kennedy, it started here really in earnest in Dade County in 1963. Let me tell you what Dade County did in 1963, and it was historic, because the industry threw at Dade County and the city of Miami everything they could during a period of nearly 9 years. Dade County in 1963, in the month of July, this is 2 years before the Highway Beautification Act, passed a law that talked about protected areas along the freeways in Miami-Dade County, including the freeways when they crisscross cities like the city of Miami. On either side of all freeways in 1963 and all future freeways, there was a protected area of 600 feet. And within that 600 feet, according to Dade County, 1963, you cannot have any billboards, outdoor advertising signs is what they're going to get really legal about it. You can't have any outdoor advertising And within 200 feet, you can't have any outdoor advertising signs at all, even if you can't see it from the freeway and it's oriented towards a local street. Completely prohibited. The billboard industry filed challenges, I think it began in 1965 against the county, because the city of Miami in 1965, in the summer, 2 years later, tightened up their ordinance, reduced the size of outdoor signs on freestanding signs from, I believe it was like 900 feet to 750 feet. Miami was following suit of what the county was doing to try to tighten things up. In fact, in county ordinance, in that other 400-foot area, where you could have signs that were not facing the freeway but were facing local streets, the size could not exceed 750 square feet. The industry sued the city of Miami. The county joined because when you're talking about the freeway areas, it's the county ordinance that controlled at the time, not the city ordinance. So the city and the county were in litigation with the industry in state court, and they won. Another suit was filed. They won. They won up on appeal. They won. They won. A federal court action was filed as a class action against Miami-Dade County, a class action on behalf of all outdoor advertising companies in Miami-Dade County. And this is everybody. You know, the people you hear about today, other than some of the long-run companies, they were all part of that litigation through companies that were predecessor companies, companies that were acquired. Everybody in the industry was suing Miami-Dade County. In 1968, Miami-Dade County won in the U.S. District Court. It took an appeal. At that time, the U.S. Fifth Circuit Court of Appeal. We know today as the 11th Circuit, but back in those days, this is before the Fifth Circuit got split up, it was to the Fifth Circuit Court of Appeals in Atlanta, and they lost. And probably for lawyers that are deep in the weeds of this stuff, that case of E.B. Elliott versus Miami-Dade County is one of the most famous cases in outdoor advertising war in this country. Because a number of principles were explored in that lengthy opinion, and in the opinion they published the entirety of the ordinance of Dade County from 1963, so that everybody could see what the court was talking about, and the protection in the buffer area, the protected area along the freeways. Somehow, along the way, I'm not sure whether everybody remembers that case. I talked to a top federal highway official 2 days ago, it might have even been yesterday, who was completely unaware that the county, back in the 1960s and early 1970s, actually had an ordinance that affected the 600-foot area on both sides of all freeways in Miami-Dade County. This is very important in connection with the legal issues that are currently ongoing. Miami, if you go back and set the clock back to 1972, at the time of the state federal agreement, and you want to have the law as it existed then apply to the city of Miami, you got to take it with the good and the bad. And for some of us in this room tonight, the good means freeway areas are protected. Federal Highway has a lot of engineers that look at these issues and not lawyers, but lawyers that look at this or planners that look at this realize that, wait a minute, Miami and Miami-Dade County have this rich history, and this is important for the outcome of what happens here. Another thing I'd like to just bring to your attention is in 1968, the state of Florida did something that only a few other states have done. They put the voters in this state, I was too young to vote in 1968, it was getting close. The voters approved the new state constitution in the summer of 1968 through resolutions, joint resolutions in Florida legislature. A revised Florida constitution was put on the ballot. It passed in November of 1968, and in the act, in the new Florida constitution, there's a provision which says, it shall be, I may just paraphrase this, it shall be the policy of the state of Florida to conserve and protect its natural resources and scenic beauty. How many other states, I'm going to have a law student here with us tonight, that's the outdoor advertising industry. Well, Miami-Dade County is winning these cases. 3 years after the Highway Beautification Act was signed by President Johnson, the same year that President Johnson talked about those goddamn greedy hogs, which you can't reason with. Florida voters said scenic beauty is the policy of the state of Florida, and is rarely mentioned by lawyers today in these battles. I mention it because I'm aware of it, but how many lawyers in the state of Florida are aware that scenic beauty is embedded in the state constitution? Very few. Everybody can hear me okay?
Yeah.
Do you like it so far?
Yes.
Okay, I'm going to have some Q&A in a bit. And I also want to talk about, because the first part of this discussion is how do we get to where we are today, and the second part of the discussion is going to be how do we, where do we go from here? What can we do, education-wise? But I want to pick up in the 1970s a little bit, and then bring it forward to the 80s and 90s. Reuben Askew signed an agreement with the federal government in 1972. It was January 27. It's known by the insiders as the state-federal agreement, and there's one in every state. And that state-federal agreement said what effective control is in the state of Florida for billboards along the roadways. The roadways, specifically the interstates, and roadways like US 1, Biscayne Boulevard, Dixie Highway, federal primary highways. The state-federal agreement said the maximum customary size allowed for billboards is 1,200 square feet. Quite frankly, the customary size for billboards in 1972 was like 400 square feet, but the industry was able to get a model agreement circulating around the states that said 1,200 square feet. The minimum spacing between billboards along the interstates would be 1,000 feet, and along local federal primary highways like US 1 it would be 500 feet. So 1,000 feet, 500 feet. And you can't have any lighting if it's intermittent flashing, etc. The only thing you could have would be non-commercial messages like the change in time, the change in the date, the change in the temperature. In 1974, by the way, 1972, shortly after the agreement was signed by Reuben Askew, the Florida legislature adopted that as part of Florida law so that we had in our Florida statutes what the provisions were of the state and federal agreement. In 1984, the state legislature tightened those controls and expanded the minimum spacing for billboards along the interstate to 1,500 feet and along federal primary highways like US 1 to 1,000. That was a positive development. More recently, the Florida legislature has developed a pilot program that shrinks those distances back along the interstate in Miami and Orange County and Hillsborough County and I believe Seminole County. A pilot program, which they were about to expand statewide until a couple of days ago, at least in the Senate, that got pulled back. Because what you have, and what you're going to be seeing in Miami, is billboards that are going to be spaced apart every 1,000 feet, potentially along both sides of the interstate because of the impact of the pilot program. We're trying to convince powers that be that a pilot program that allows clusters of billboards is not a good thing. In 1978, and this is an issue that's now in total court up in the District of Columbia, Congress considered changing the Highway Beautification Act to allow what's called commercial electronic variable message signs, like we've seen in Hialeah, to be placed along the interstate and federal primary highway system and change the Highway Beautification Act. It failed. There was a House provision that would do that. The Senate provision did not do it. Scoop Jackson, for those of you who are old enough to remember Scoop Jackson was the leader of the Senate. He promised his Senate colleagues that would not happen. And indeed, in the conference committee, it didn't happen. The House version didn't make it out. But now, we're seeing these digital billboards, which are commercial electronic variable message signs, CEVMS, being placed along the interstates and federal aid primary highways in derogation of the Highway Beautification Act they could not change in Congress. And that's because lawyers at Federal Highway did not do their job. I've seen the internal emails. They were not aware of the history of the efforts in Congress to change the law. One called it arcane bit of history. There's nothing arcane about the House of Representatives being unable to change an act in Congress when the Senate says no. That ain't arcane. That's like legislation 101. So I don't know what the outcome is going to be of the litigation in Washington, but Federal Highway is being taken to the task because Scenic America, for the first time in this long history, has actually filed a lawsuit. And it's not a lawsuit against the industry. It's a lawsuit against the United States Department of Transportation and the Federal Highway Administration to protect roadways like Palmetto Expressway from being inundated with digital billboards. I saw some on the way down here today along I-95. I wasn't driving, Joan was. Joan, was that distracting? The battles in Miami-Dade County, in the city of Miami, heated up around 2000, 2001, actually maybe back in 1997. How many of you have heard the Dusty Melton story about the Great Billboard Compromise of 1985? See a fair number of hands. Dusty's very passionate about this. Dusty has told me on probably 3 or 4 dozen occasions, it's not really the city conservation thing that gets him. What gets him is the rule of law. And he was involved in 1985 in what's called the Great Billboard Compromise. And the Great Billboard Compromise was, okay, the industry wants to have some billboards along the expressway in this protected area, and maybe some things were going up illegally. So the compromise was the industry could have 10 billboards, but it couldn't be east of I-95, and there could only be 10, and the industry kind of divvied up who was going to get which ones. And that was a great compromise. So that in Miami-Dade County and the city of Miami, you're not going to see billboards along the freeways other than west of I-95, there will only be 10. By the late 1990s, that 10 had grown to around 40. And because somebody with the city of Miami, which created problems obviously in the late 1990s, started issuing permits for whatever reason. Were they negligent? Was something else going on? I don't know. But it became a problem. And Dusty was hired as a lobbyist for one of the largest billboard companies in the world. And his job was to convince the city of Miami to hold off enforcement. Hold off enforcement. And the way this works is, Dusty explained it to me, and it works the same way in any city, any major city in the United States. If you're a powerful industry, I've been a lobbyist once before. What you do is you hire lobbyists that are targeting each particular elected official. This elected official, for instance, John Preston, there's no secret there. So if you want to influence John, maybe you hire me. If you want to influence someone else on our city council, you hire someone else. We have 19 members, so you have to hire a lot of lobbyists, but you get the idea. There's a lobbyist or a lobbying team for every elected official. And Dusty was part of that lobbying team. And he told them, we just need some more time to work something out. And then he realized that he had been lied to, as he put it, in his interview either with Miami Herald or with New Times. I think it was with the Herald. He had been lied to when he found out that they were doing an end run in Tallahassee in our wonderful Florida legislature, the petri dish of all bad ideas. And they implemented, the place they implement those bad ideas are right here in South Florida. He had been lied to because they were doing an end run. And it was an amendment to the Burke-Harris Act to provide new rights to outdoor advertising companies in connection with their billboards. It didn't It passed in 2001. The governor vetoed a bill because other things that were in the bill. It's one of those things where it becomes a train of the governor who doesn't like things in the train, so the train, crashes. It came back in 2002 to pass. Dusty fired his client, and I don't know whether the client knew before Dusty fired him or when they opened up the Miami Herald as Dusty's picture, with locations all around Miami of illegal billboards owned and operated by his client. Dusty was so angry that he had lied. A lot of lobbyists really care about their reputation. They don't want to be lying to somebody and get caught because then the word's no good. Dusty was so angry that he had lied to members of the Miami City Commission that he couldn't take it. And so he quit. He fired his client. So it's the first time in his 20 years as a lobbyist that he's ever fired a client. I don't know, maybe those of you who know Dusty or familiar with politics in Miami who know whether Dusty's ever fired another client. I don't think so. But Dusty was angry. And so what you had in Miami was a slow unraveling of what had been fought so hard between 1963 and 1972 when the last appeal was over with, and all that litigation over the county's ordinance, over the city's ordinances, 9 years of litigation, all that is starting to go out the window because we have a lack of enforcement, we have shenanigans in Tallahassee. I read the Times Union in Jacksonville 2 days ago, that editorial, you see that those shenanigans are continuing. And we're starting to lose it. We're starting to lose a beautiful Miami, a beautiful Miami day. And this is happening in communities not just Hialeah, but throughout South Florida. I'm going to show you now a presentation a preview of a presentation I'm going to make in a couple of days in Savannah. It's called the National Alliance of Highway Beautification Agencies. As I mentioned before, it's kind of a misnomer because the beautification agencies are the state DOTs that regulate outdoor advertising. And if you're familiar with some of the state DOTs that regulate outdoor advertising, it's a revolving door to the industry. Federal Highway has been pretty good, but even there are people at Federal Highway that revolve out of Federal Highway and go to work for the industry. So, fortunately, about 10 years ago, this group decided that the scenic community should have a seat at the table because the outdoor advertising people were on their programs, were on their discussion panels, but nobody from the scenic community was. And that changed about 10 years ago. As I will tell everybody in Savannah, this is a wall mural. Actually, this wall mural is right here in the city of Miami. I believe it's is that a public library? I'm trying to remember where I looked at this from, but I looked at it from a Wikipedia site for purposes of presentation, not for sale. But this is a wall mural. This is a billboard on a wall. Now, the industry calls it a wall mural, and if you follow what happened in the legislature last year, you will find out that they call digital billboards on water management district property public information systems. Folks, these are billboards. Whether you call them wallscapes, wall murals, public information systems, they're billboards. And the industry has for years and years tried to get away from the term billboard. Why? Because it carries with it bad connotations. And if you look in the case law the last 100 years, billboards are considered by the land use settings as being nuisances, something that's unnecessary, something that is clutter. So let's not call it a billboard, let's call it a wall. The Federal Highway Administration says if you're going to have customary use at a local level and not go by the state federal agreement, which is kind of the battle that's going on now, as Miami seeks to be certified and have effective control over outdoor advertising based upon what the city says is customary use, the customary use has to be lawful. Back in the day. Well, billboards within 600 feet of the expressway were not lawful back in 1965, 1968, or the side. And so this is an important issue for Federal Highway to grapple with now that they realize, or will realize, that, hey, there's a county ordinance passed in '63 that the county won in legal challenge after legal challenge. That is unlawful. That is a 9,000, it's close to 10,000 square feet long mural on the wall of the Miami Herald. It blocks the view of the Biscayne Bay. And actually, if you look back in the ordinances of the city of Miami back in the 1960s, it was prohibited to have any outdoor advertising signs within 200 feet of the bay. That's within 200 feet of the bay. It's within 50 feet of the interstate. I mean, and where has the Miami Herald been? I don't know if anyone's here with the Herald tonight, but quite frankly, you know, the Herald has been missing in action on these stories. And I guess so. If your business guys are taking money for a 10,000 square foot billboard that's right on the bay that can't possibly be considered customary use in 1968, 1965, 1972, well, yeah, I better not write about that. I mean, you know, with all due respect to anyone from the city of Miami, 10,000 square foot billboards were not customary and standard in the city of Miami and along the interstate in the 1960s. And when you tell Federal Highway that that was customary, standard in 1972 along the interstates in Miami, you're lying. And that's why Federal Highway